All right, I am here with Carly Van Overberg. Carly, are you willing to share with us what you do at Purdue and your role?
Yeah, so I am currently the interim assistant director for integrated communications and student development. Before all of the COVID craziness, I was one of the assistant directors for intramural sports, so I ran that program. But since June-ish, this is my new role. So there's been a lot of learning and a lot of communication that has had to happen because of all that.
Sweet. So I'll go ahead and start with the interview. My first question is, how do interpersonal communication skills help your day-to-day life in your job?
Yeah. Um, just the ability to communicate with other people is so important in any position. With my position being new to me, at least, I've had to really rely on being able to talk to other people and ask questions um, and form relationships quickly. So when in intramurals, I was kind of like in my own bubble, and like, yes, I interacted with other people, but not anywhere close to as much as I do with comms now because we touch every single department. Um, so that's been huge, and just being able to quickly learn how to communicate with someone and express what I need and get what they need in order to form those relationships, in order to keep everyone successful. So that's really, I would say, the biggest thing is just being able to talk to other people in order to get to your common goal and get there as effectively as possible.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like it's a big role in your job, like every single day. And then how has like COVID altered communication within your role, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, it's totally different now. Everything is electronic, right?
Mm,
What used to be a 5 second, like, hey, let me pop in your office and ask you this question, becomes, five emails or a Zoom meeting and all this stuff. So that's been hard. I think it's gotten easier as we learned to navigate it and we got more used to it. But I would say like March time, like when it all first started, I was like, I don't even know how to talk to anyone anymore. Like, I would say I FaceTime and I call people now way more than I ever used to. Because in the beginning it was all like email and text, and finally I was just like, this is not efficient. Like, I need to actually have a conversation with someone. So I think in that way, it's just changed how we view things and has forced us to find different ways to connect. Um, just because I think we all crave that still, right? Like, I think for a while we got into our little bubbles of, I'm just going to do my own thing and I'm not going to actually interact with another human face to face, even if it is virtually, and it didn't work. So finding like a hybrid of communication, I think, is kind of what we're all doing now.
yeah, that's so relatable when you're like, I forgot how to communicate with people. Like I went to some like bachelorette thing over the summer and I was like, I haven't seen people in months. Yeah, that's definitely relatable. And then like what so you work with students a lot. And so have you come across any communication barriers working with students? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like, students are my favorite part of my job. They always have been. And so I'm so grateful to still have a staff, even though it's a little bit different. I mean, you and I have never really met face to face, like in person yet. So figuring out how to still make these connections and still be able to communicate with you guys, and um, my leadership style is very like chill, which doesn't necessarily come across all that great in an email until you've met me, because I come off like rambly and that sort of thing. And so that's been interesting to navigate, like how do I build this trust with a staff of people, some of whom I've never met at all, or I've only seen via Zoom or something like that. um, I think another thing that has been hard is everybody is just kind of on their own time, and I do the same thing. Sometimes I'm on my email and I answer you immediately, or I don't get to it for another 4 hours. And I think because we have less structured time, that's been difficult, because it's like, no, I need this now, but you're doing something else, and that sort of thing. So learning how to manage not having a schedule maybe has been a little bit of a barrier too, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was like your communication with students, but as far as like coworkers who are adults and work at the co-rec, have there ever been a situation where like you had a miscommunication with the coworker, and like how did you handle that professionally?
Yeah. I mean, miscommunications happen all the time, and and I think I handle them differently based on the situation. So I had two that come to mind, right? One was like, oh my gosh, I read this wrong. Here's the actual answer to your question. One of those really simple ones. Or, something that happened just yesterday was that we weren't like on the same page about the expectations of something. And so sent an email and was just like, hey, this is the situation that I ran into. Like, can we figure out where the disconnect happened so that we can move forward on the same page? And it was great, because the person I was talking to responded and was like, yes, 100%. Like, I own this. This is what I thought was happening. And so my response to that was just like, okay, here's where I could have been better with communicating too. So I think what's important is just remembering that you're all trying to get to a common goal. And so it's just understanding your own weaknesses and forgiving the weaknesses of others, and moving forward in the best direction. It's probably, in my opinion, is the best way to handle any of it, and just understand where someone else is coming from and what they thought before getting angry about the fact that they didn't understand.
Yeah, that is so good. Like that reminds me a lot of like what we talk about in class, like having empathy and like really understanding that it's not just your perspective, there's multiple perspectives. So that's really good advice. And yeah, that like kind of ties into leadership. And my last question for you is, at the co-rec, is the leadership style more collaborative or traditional? And like that includes like the leadership above you or like on the same level as you.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both. So Mike Warren, our director, is a really transparent guy. Like, he does his best to just explain to us everything that's happening, and like all of the different pieces that are going into the decisions that he's making, which works really well for me because I like to understand the whole picture. Um, so that helps, that kind of transparent communication. Along with that, like, we have a lot of independence, so we can, no one is really like checking up on you constantly. So I appreciate that as well. It leads to a lot of ownership of your space and your program. Where it plays into communication, though, is that Jenny, for example, is my boss now. She's not checking in on me constantly, but like, she wants to know everything that's going on. So it's constant communication of saying, hey, this is what popped up, or this is what's happening there. I think with COVID, we've become more collaborative, so that independence makes you really focused and can kind of make us siloed sometimes because you're so focused on your own thing. But I think recently we've become more collaborative in how can we get creative to pair with other departments in order to put out a new product, right? Because our traditional product isn't working. Something that we're working on right now, it's not even officially live yet, is an equipment rental. So that's member services and fitness working together to say, okay, what can we provide to students? What are we not using, and that sort of thing. And those are two departments that don't necessarily mesh in that way all the time. So you just kind of adapt to the situation that you're in, and your style has to change for that. I think that's been the biggest thing with all of this chaos of this year, is just adapting to what's kind of thrown at you.
Yeah. I I have noticed like it's really cool to see the collaboration, especially in integrated comm, like how we're like promoting so many different areas of the co-rec, and like that's cool to see a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the big things my new role has shown me is just how much goes into every little thing, right? I like to think I did a good job of knowing what other people were doing, but I didn't know like all of the steps that went into just this one thing. So that's been a really neat kind of learning experience, and you appreciate all the work that other people are doing a little bit more when you see the details of it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And thank you again for letting me interview you and learning more about what it's like working in communications. Yeah, this has been a great learning experience for me.
If you have any other questions, let me know.